Number 12. No-cook foods. You'll need. When the power goes out, most people find out what's actually in their pantry the hard way. The power goes out, the stove is dead, and suddenly half the food in the kitchen is useless. I want to talk about something nobody really plans for until it's too late. Not the flashlight, not the generator. The food you can actually eat when there's no way to cook it. A few months ago, my power went out for almost 2 full days. Nothing dramatic, just a storm. But it forced me to look through my own kitchen and realize how much of what I had stored required a stove, a microwave, or hot water I didn't have. That's what this list is about. 12 foods that don't need heat, don't need water, and don't need power to keep you fed if things go sideways for a few days. Stick around, because number 6 on this list is the one that surprised me the most. I didn't expect it to matter as much as it did, and I'll explain exactly why when we get there. If you find this kind of practical, no panic prepping useful, go ahead and subscribe now. This channel is about staying ahead of problems before they happen, not reacting after they do. Let's get into it. Item number 1. Canned beans. Canned beans are the first thing I always tell people to check, because most households already have a few cans sitting in the back of a cabinet and don't think twice about them. Beans are dense in protein and fiber, they're shelf-stable for years, and they're already fully cooked when they come out of the can. You genuinely can eat them cold, straight out of the can, and get real nutrition from them. Retailers have noted for years that canned beans are one of the most consistent sellers during severe weather alerts, right alongside water and batteries. It's not a coincidence. People instinctively reach for them because they know beans will actually fill them up. I used to keep maybe 1 or 2 cans around, just as an afterthought. After that outage I mentioned earlier, I went back and counted what I actually had, and it was nowhere near enough for even 2 days for my household. That was a wake-up call. Now I keep a small rotating stock, and I actually use them in normal cooking too, so nothing goes to waste or expires quietly in the back of the shelf. It's not about hoarding. It's about not being caught with an empty shelf when it matters. If a can has a pull-tab lid, that's even better, because you're not depending on a can opener you might not be able to find in the dark. Keep at least a few pull-tab cans specifically for this reason. This is the kind of thing that feels boring until the day it isn't. Nobody regrets having extra beans. People regret not having them. Item number 2. Peanut butter. Peanut butter is one of those foods that quietly does a lot of work. It's calorie dense, it's shelf stable, and it needs absolutely nothing to prepare. No heat, no water, no tools beyond a spoon. A single jar can provide a meaningful amount of usable calories for several days if you're being careful with portions. That matters more than people realize when you're trying to stretch a food supply during an outage. Nutrition guidance around emergency food kits consistently points to peanut butter as a top recommendation, specifically because it combines protein, fat, and shelf stability in one product that most people already have in the house. I actually didn't think much about this until I started paying closer attention to what my kids would actually eat without complaining if the power was out. Beans are great, but a picky 8-year-old is not excited about cold beans. A spoonful of peanut butter on a cracker is a different story. That personal detail changed how I stock things. I stopped thinking only about calories and started thinking about what people will actually eat willingly, especially kids, because food that sits untouched doesn't help anyone. Keep one jar specifically set aside and don't treat it as your everyday jar. Rotate it out every so often so it stays fresh, but don't let it become the jar you use for weeknight sandwiches until it's gone. This is one of those items that feels almost too simple to matter, and that's exactly why people overlook it. Item number 3. Canned tuna or salmon. Canned tuna and canned salmon are already fully cooked, shelf-stable, and packed with protein. You can eat them straight from the can with a fork, no prep required. These are also some of the most nutritionally efficient foods you can store, because you're getting a meaningful amount of protein and healthy fat in a small, compact package that doesn't take up much pantry space. Health and nutrition sources have flagged canned fish repeatedly as one of the most efficient shelf-stable protein sources available, largely because the canning process locks in nutrition without needing refrigeration. I'll be honest, I used to avoid keeping much canned fish around because I didn't love the smell. But after going a day and a half eating mostly crackers and dried fruit during that outage, I understood why protein matters so much more than I gave it credit for. You get hungry again fast without it. Now I keep a mix of tuna and salmon because salmon tends to be a little more palatable for people who aren't used to eating canned fish plain, and having variety matters when you're eating the same stored food for multiple days in a row. Pick pull-tab cans if you can find them, for the same reason as the beans. And don't buy this the week you think you might need it. Buy it now, quietly, as part of your normal shopping. This one isn't glamorous, but it's one of the most efficient things you can have sitting in your kitchen. Item number 4. Whole grain crackers. Crackers don't sound like emergency food, but they solve a specific problem. They give you something to actually put the peanut butter, tuna, or beans on, instead of eating everything with a spoon for 3 days straight. Whole grain crackers specifically add fiber and a bit more staying power compared to plain white crackers, and they hold up well in sealed packaging for months without going stale if stored properly. Food storage guidance almost always separates protein sources from what people call vehicle foods, meaning the thing you actually eat the protein with. Crackers are the most common vehicle food recommended because they're compact and don't need refrigeration. I didn't think about this until I was eating canned tuna directly from the can with a fork and realized how much better it would have been with something crunchy underneath it. It's a small thing, but small comfort details matter a lot more than people expect when you're stressed and tired. Now I keep a sealed container of crackers specifically for this, separate from the ones we snack on casually, so I'm not accidentally digging into my emergency stock on a random Tuesday. Keep them in an airtight container, not just the original sleeve, especially if you're in a humid climate. Soft crackers are not a fun surprise on day 2 of an outage. This is a small addition that makes everything else on this list more bearable to actually eat. Item number 5. Trail mix and mixed nuts. Mixed nuts and trail mix pack a surprising amount of calories and healthy fat into a small volume, which makes them incredibly efficient for emergency storage. No prep, no mess, no cooking. They're calorie-dense enough that a relatively small bag can carry someone through a good chunk of a day if needed, which is exactly why hikers and backpackers rely on them so heavily for the same reason preppers do. This is one of those crossover categories where outdoor survival guidance and emergency food guidance line up almost perfectly, because both situations share the same core problem. You need calories, and you need them without cooking anything. I started keeping trail mix around originally for road trips, not emergencies. It wasn't until the outage that I realized how well it doubled as backup food, since it was already sitting there, sealed and untouched. Since then, I've specifically bought an extra bag or two just to set aside, separate from the ones we snack on in the car, because otherwise it just quietly disappears before you ever need it for anything else. Watch the salt content if anyone in your household needs to manage sodium, and try to grab a low-sugar version if you can find one, since some trail mixes are basically candy with a few nuts mixed in. This is one of the easiest additions to your stock, because most people already buy it anyway. Item number 6. Dried fruit. This is the one I told you about at the beginning. Dried fruit surprised me more than almost anything else on this list, and here's why. Dried fruit gives you a fast source of natural sugar and quick energy, which matters a lot more during a stressful outage than people expect. When you're tired, cold, and eating cold canned food for 2 days straight, a quick energy boost genuinely changes your mood and your ability to function. Nutrition sources point out that natural sugars from dried fruit are absorbed differently than processed sugar, giving a steadier energy lift without the same crash. That's part of why it shows up so often in survival and outdoor nutrition guidance. Here's my personal angle on this one. During that outage, my energy kept crashing in the afternoon, and I didn't understand why until I realized I was eating almost nothing but protein and fat for 2 straight days. A handful of dried apricots completely changed how I felt within about 20 minutes, I genuinely didn't expect that. I had always thought of dried fruit as a snack, not a functional food. Now I keep a specific bag set aside just for this purpose, separate from whatever we're already snacking on around the house. Look for dried fruit with no added sugar if you want to keep it closer to its natural nutritional value, and store it in an airtight container so it doesn't dry out even further or attract moisture depending on your climate. This is the item most people skip when they think about emergency food, and it might be the one that actually keeps you functional. Item number 7. Canned fruit in juice. Canned fruit solves two problems at once. It gives you natural sugar for energy, and it gives you a bit of hydration, since it's packed in juice rather than syrup. This matters more than people think, because during an outage, especially in warmer weather, staying hydrated can become just as important as staying fed. Canned fruit in juice quietly helps with both. Emergency preparedness guidance frequently recommends fruit packed in juice specifically over fruit packed in heavy syrup, because the added hydration and lower added sugar make it a more functional choice, not just a treat. I'll admit I used to buy whatever was cheapest, which was usually the syrup version, without thinking about the difference. After paying more attention to this, I started specifically buying the juice-packed versions and keeping a few extra cans aside. It's a small swap, but it's the kind of detail that separates food that just fills you up from food that actually helps your body function properly during a stressful few days. Keep a mix of fruit types if you can, because variety matters when you're eating from storage for multiple days. Nobody wants to eat the exact same 3 foods on repeat. This one is easy to overlook because it feels like dessert, but it's doing more work than it gets credit for. Item number 8. Protein or granola bars. Protein and granola bars are built for exactly this kind of situation. No prep, no mess, individually portioned, and easy to grab quickly if you need to move fast. They're especially useful because they're portable in a way that canned food isn't. If you ever needed to leave your home quickly during an extended outage, bars are something you can grab in seconds and take with you. Emergency kit checklists almost universally include some version of bars specifically for this portability factor, separate from the calorie density itself. I started keeping a small box specifically in a bag by the door, not mixed in with our regular pantry stock, after realizing that if we ever needed to leave in a hurry, I didn't want to be digging through cans and jars to figure out what to bring. That single change, just having a few bars already grabbed and ready, made me feel noticeably calmer about the whole situation, even during a relatively minor outage. Check the ingredient list and try to avoid ones that are basically candy bars with a health label. Look for something with real protein content, not just sugar and chocolate coating. This is less about calories and more about speed and portability when you don't have time to think. Item number 9. Shelf-stable milk boxes. Shelf-stable milk, the kind that comes in sealed cartons and doesn't need refrigeration until opened, is one of the most underused items in emergency food planning. It gives you a way to soften cereal, add to coffee, or just drink on its own without needing a working refrigerator. That flexibility matters more than people expect once the fridge stops being reliable. This type of milk uses ultra-high temperature processing, which is standard in many countries and increasingly common on US shelves, specifically because it allows long-term storage without refrigeration. I didn't even know these existed in a practical sense until I started specifically researching outage-friendly foods after that storm. Once I found them, it completely changed how I thought about breakfast options during an outage, since cereal without milk is a pretty sad meal. Now I keep a few small boxes set aside, specifically the individual serving size, so nothing goes to waste once opened if we're not using it quickly. Check the expiration date when you buy it, since it's long-lasting but not infinite, and rotate it into regular use occasionally so it doesn't sit forgotten for years. This is one of the more surprising items on this list, simply because most people don't know it exists as an option. Item number 10. Applesauce cups. Applesauce cups are easy to dismiss as a kid snack, but they're actually a smart addition to any no-cook food stock. Sealed, individually portioned, no prep, and gentle on the stomach if anyone in the house is feeling stressed or off their normal routine. They provide quick, easy to digest calories, which matters specifically for kids, elderly family members, or anyone who might be dealing with stress-related appetite issues during a disruption like a power outage. Nutrition guidance for emergency kits often specifically calls out easy-to-digest, low-effort foods like this for households with young children or older adults, since not everyone can comfortably eat dense, heavy foods during a stressful situation. I noticed this firsthand watching my own kids during that outage. They didn't want beans, they didn't want tuna, but they happily ate applesauce cups without any complaints, and that mattered more to me in the moment than I expected it to. Now I keep a small box specifically set aside, separate from the ones we go through casually, because I learned the hard way that they disappear fast once kids know they're in the house. Check for the no sugar added versions if you want to keep the nutritional value a bit cleaner, and store them somewhere they won't get crushed if they're in a bag rather than a box. This is one of those items that feels small, but it solves a very real problem for households with kids or picky eaters. Item number 11. Beef jerky. Beef jerky is dense, portable, shelf-stable, and packed with protein, and it needs absolutely no preparation at all. Open the bag and eat. It's one of the most calorie-efficient protein sources you can store, because the drying process concentrates the nutrition into a small, lightweight product that lasts a long time in sealed packaging. This is another category where outdoor and survival guidance overlaps heavily with general emergency prep guidance, since jerky checks nearly every box for portable, no-cook protein. I started keeping this around mostly for hiking trips, and it wasn't until later that I realized it made just as much sense sitting in a kitchen cabinet as it does in a backpack. It's the same problem, just a different setting. Since then, I've kept a couple of sealed bags specifically set aside, not mixed in with the ones we snack on during movie nights, because otherwise it never actually makes it into an emergency stock. Watch the sodium content, since jerky can be high in salt, and try to balance it with some of the other lower sodium items on this list if anyone in your household needs to be mindful of that. This is one of the most efficient protein sources on this entire list, ounce for ounce. Item number 12. Honey might be the most overlooked item on this entire list, and it deserves more attention than it usually gets. It doesn't spoil. Properly sealed honey can last for an extremely long time in storage, and it provides a concentrated source of quick energy without needing any preparation at all. Food storage guidance frequently highlights honey specifically because of its shelf stability, and it's one of the few foods that genuinely holds up for years without meaningful degradation if kept sealed and away from moisture. I'll admit, I had a jar of honey in my pantry for longer than I want to say, and I never thought of it as anything other than something for tea. It wasn't until I started paying attention to this topic that I realized how valuable it actually is as a quick energy source during a stretch of no-cook eating. Now, I keep a small jar specifically set aside, separate from the one we use day to day, just so it's there and untouched if I ever actually need it. Keep it sealed, keep it somewhere it won't get knocked over, and don't worry too much about it going bad, because realistically, it won't for a very long time. It's a small, quiet addition to this list, but it might be one of the most reliable ones here. Here's the pattern behind everything on this list. None of these items are exotic. None of them are expensive. Every single one is something you've probably already bought at some point without thinking twice about it. The difference is intention. Most people have some of these foods scattered randomly through their kitchen, but almost nobody has set them aside specifically, in one place, ready to go if the power actually goes out for a few days. That's really what this comes down to. It's not about panic. It's not about filling a basement with supplies you'll never use. It's about taking food you already buy anyway and being a little more deliberate about how much you keep on hand and where you keep it. Most people will only think about this the day the power actually goes out, when the stores are already crowded and the shelves are already thinning. You're watching this now, which means you get to prepare quietly, calmly, and well before that ever happens. That's the whole point of paying attention to things like this before everyone else does. If this was useful, go ahead and subscribe, because I'll be covering more practical, no-panic topics like this regularly. drop a comment and let me know which of these 12 you already have sitting in your kitchen right now and which ones you're adding to your list. Stay ready, stay calm, and I'll see you in the next one.